You'll have folks tell you that every bit of federal spending is absolutely necessary and laudatory. It's not.
That is Chris Christie yesterday speaking to a crowd at the American Enterprise Institute. In the audience, one of the resident fellows at the American Enterprise Institute, also the senior political analyst for the Washington Examiner, Michael Barone. He joins us now. Michael, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
So give us your assessment of Governor Christie's remarks. How did he do?
He was, let's say he was blunt. He's become a large figure in the political landscape in more ways than one. And he basically said, look, we've got such a difficult situation. We're facing such a disaster ahead, economic, fiscal, and so forth, that we've simply got to act now. And he criticized President Obama for putting forth a budget that doesn't address entitlements at all, and for seeming to, he didn't say so by name, but, for playing political games and seeking political advantage out of having the Republicans go first. And he also criticized the congressional Republicans and basically said, where are all these guys that said they were going to do something serious? Now, he didn't mention that House Budget Chairman Paul Ryan says he's going to address entitlements in the fiscal year 2012 budget that he's going to present next month, but of course that is next month and it's the next fiscal year. And Chris Christie seemed to be saying, act this year, act this month, this fiscal year.
Hey, Michael, Major Garrett, good to talk to you.
Hey,
How
Major.
are you?
It's great to see you after we had offices across the hall from each other over at U.S.
Oh, that is true.
It is true, and the world has turned 1,000 times since then, but I will tell the folks in the radio audience that I knew that I had arrived in Washington when one day, quietly in my office, you knocked on my door and asked me a question. And I said, I said to myself, I've made it. Because Michael Barone has just asked me something, and I never thought that would happen.
Of course, the answer was 3:30, I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes, I said the Coke machine is just down the hall. But be that as it may. Two questions, Michael. First of all, Chris Christie delivered this at American Enterprise Institute. He did not go to CPAC. He sort of stood alone. Do you think the desire for him to run in 2012 is becoming larger, potentially irresistible? And do you believe Governor Christie's protestations that he's either not ready, not interested, or both?
I believe his protestations that he's not ready. He addressed this in his talk. He said, well, some people see the opportunity and they just go for it, but they're not really prepared for the job. And I think perhaps I'm naive, but I think that he's been thinking seriously about this. One of the things you have to be prepared to do if you're president is to have to order people to go to their death. You have to order military action. You are the commander-in-chief. Sure. You have to pick the military leaders that supervise this. That's a difficult thing to do, and the way our political system has worked, we almost always get presidents who haven't had a whole lot of military and foreign policy experience. And I think when you look how George W. Bush has aged, how Bill Clinton aged in office, and back to previous presidents, this responsibility takes a big toll on them. And I think my interpretation is Mr. Christie has thought about this, and he said, well, I was a federal prosecutor in New Jersey, and I did a pretty good job, and I think I'm doing a good job of governor of New Jersey, where the issues are primarily fiscal, service delivery, and so forth. I'm not prepared to do this other job, and where the heck am I going to find time to get prepared to do this other job? That's my interpretation. As I say, maybe naive. Actually, somebody that's interested not just in getting a job, but in whether he can do it. But that's my interpretation.
Well, I don't know if this is actually in the New Jersey governor's job description, but clearly he is acting as kind of an influence or thought leader to his fellow governors. You got Scott Walker in Wisconsin now taking on the unions and saying, "Hey, collective bargaining legislatively has to be taken down because we can't afford it." You got Rick Scott, John Kasich, and Governor Walker again in Wisconsin saying, "We don't need high-speed rail. What are you giving it for?" So I got to believe there's almost a Chris Christie core developing out there among Republican governors.
Well, he said, look, I happened, because New Jersey happens to vote in the odd year in 2009, I sort of got in front of the parade. He said, I anticipated there'd be a whole lot of Republican governors elected this time, as there have been. Mm-hmm. And he said, maybe I helped to set the way. Interestingly, he also acknowledged in an entirely favorable way the Democratic governor of New York.
Oh, I heard that, yeah.
So he said, look, Cuomo's saying the same kind of things I'm saying, and he says, I think we're even hearing them from Jerry Brown out in California. The moonbeam is.
Yeah, I'm going to reserve judgment on that one. I'll buy Cuomo, but not this.
Michael, you and I are both students of history. You're a much more adept one than I am, but I wonder if you think, as I do, that something is going on now that was similar to what we saw in the early 90s that led up to the Republican takeover Congress in the 104th. That is to say, governors, particularly Republican, but not exclusively Republican governors, dealing with tough public policy issues in innovative ways and teaching Washington a thing or two, about political courage and about political innovation and policy innovation. What do you think?
Well, Major, you're a little bit ahead of me in articulating that in just way, and I think you wrote my column for Sunday. But yeah, I think we're seeing this. The difference was that in the early 90s, the governors were talking about things like welfare. They were talking about education. They were talking about those substantive things. The focus here is much more on the fiscal thing because the recession, the fact that these states' governments have made these pension promises and union collective bargaining contracts and so forth, they've got themselves in a position where they just can't pay for this stuff, and they're going to have to make different arrangements. When CalPERS, the California State Pension Fund, which was supposedly a great investor, lost 1/4 of its value in the markets in calendar year 2008. Suddenly, all those promised pensions that had been increased 25 to 50% retroactively by Gray Davis in 1999, suddenly the cupboard was bare. And, you've got Democrats now calling for changing the pension system in California because the pension payments are going to crowd out all those social service programs that they want to fund. So, yeah, I think something is going on there, and that the governors are dealing with these issues of long-term fiscal things more proactively, so forth, than the president certainly and the Congress, it seems, is dealing with the federal fiscal problems of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Well, that having been said, and looking back to the budget battle that's brewing between the White House and certainly the Republican Congress, can you give us a projection 6 weeks out? Where do you think this is going to settle through the continuing resolution, the debt ceiling?
I think the momentum is for cutting spending, and I think that we've been seeing it manifest in the Congress already. Major knows the House of Representatives very well, and that typically in the past the leadership has prevailed. Well, we've seen the Republican leadership muscle from increasing their spending cuts in the 11 budget from 57 to $100 billion. We have seen them lose a vote on the floor yesterday where half the Republicans joined more than half the Democrats and said, we don't want to pay for a second jet engine for this aircraft or whatever it was.
Yeah, that was Boehner's proposal, too.
That was Boehner's proposal. Hey, that's the GE plant that's in the town he grew up in, Hamilton County, Ohio. The momentum is going in this direction. Paul Ryan earlier this week was saying he wasn't going to address entitlements in the next budget, and then changed his mind and said he was. So I see people being pushed in this direction on all sides. The president presented this budget that didn't address these things at all, and then he said, well, I'll go, snow the press club. I'll go to, the press corps. I'll go into the briefing room, and everybody will think it's wonderful. And boy, they did, what used to be an Obama fan club, didn't like it at all, and peppered him with questions. And of course, Obama's always puzzled when he is not greeted with adulation. Right. It's a new experience for him. He doesn't like it.
Okay.
He doesn't quite understand it.
All right, Mike, we got to leave it there, Michael. But thanks for your report, Michael Barone of the American Enterprise Institute, and of course.